Tunisia, early 1943. The desert wind carries the smell of oil, dust, and cordite. German soldiers, caked in sand and sweat, lean from the turrets of their Panzer IVs, kings of the battlefield. Ahead of them, a tiny vehicle bounces across a rutted track, squat, boxy, no armor, no doors. It looks more like a toy than a weapon of war. The Germans burst into laughter. Spielzeug, one of them says. Toy, the word spreads through the ranks like wildfire. Cut to archival footage. A Willys MB Jeep rattling over uneven ground, windshield folded flat, engine whining. They weren't entirely wrong. Compared to the steel monsters of the Reich, the Panzer divisions, and the mighty Tiger tanks, America's new quarter-ton reconnaissance car looked absurd. Its engine produced just 60 horsepower. Its paper-thin body could barely stop a bullet. Its name, the Willys MB, or, as the soldiers would soon call it, the Jeep. The Wehrmacht prided itself on its machines, precision engineering, hardened steel, and sheer mechanical intimidation. Their vehicles were built to dominate, to project the image of unstoppable force. The Americans, by contrast, arrived with something that looked improvised, a metal shoebox on wheels, painted olive drab. Even some of their own officers doubted it. General George Lynch called it a cross between a baby carriage and a billy goat. Quick cuts, mechanics hammering panels into shape, soldiers shaking their heads, Jeep climbing a hill in a test run. But looks were deceiving. Beneath its plain surface, the Willys MB carried a secret, purposeful simplicity. Every inch of it was designed for function over form. Lightweight, easy to fix, able to go almost anywhere a man could walk. The Jeep's baptism came in the deserts of North Africa. During the campaign against Rommel's Afrika Korps, American troops, fresh to the war, soon found themselves in a furnace 120 degrees by day. Freezing by night, tank engines overheated, trucks bogged down in sand. But the little Jeep kept moving across dunes, through wadis, over rock, where German panzers needed clear roads and fuel convoys. The Jeep needed only grit and a few gallons of gasoline. Veterans would later recall that it was the first machine that seemed to want to fight alongside them. A mechanico comrade. The laughter faded quickly. American troops began to personalize their Jeeps. They gave them names, painted pin-ups and slogans, draped them in dust and memories. One officer joked that the Jeep was as faithful as a dog, as strong as a mule, and as agile as a goat. But to the men who depended on them, that wasn't a joke. In a war where everything broke, friendships, morale, machinery, the Jeep didn't dot it, carried scouts through enemy lines, medics to the wounded, commanders to the front. It towed anti-tank guns, hauled supplies, even served as makeshift ambulances. Visual black and white photos, Jeeps with stretchers lashed to their sides. Soldiers hunched over maps on the hood, dust storms whipping past. Its engine note, that high, uneven whine, became part of the soundtrack of Allied victory. Even the Germans began to take notice. At first, they mocked it. Later, they used it. Captured Jeeps were repainted and pressed into service by the Wehrmacht, who found them invaluable for reconnaissance and courier work. In one diary entry from a German officer near Kasserine Pass, he wrote, "These small American cars, they move like ghosts. Over sand, over mud, they are always there. It's easy to laugh at what you don't understand." The Germans measured strength in armor, thickness, and gun caliber. The Americans measured it in reliability and faith in the men behind the wheel. The Jeep wasn't built to intimidate. It was built to endure. And in war, endurance often matters more than fear. From Tunisia's dunes to Europe's forests, the little machine that once drew laughter would soon earn respect. From friend and foe alike, it would climb mountains no tank could reach, cross rivers no truck could ford, and save lives under fire when nothing else could move. By the end of the war, it would be everywhere, from the snows of the Ardennes to the beaches of Normandy, the jungles of Burma to the streets of Paris. Pause, when the laughter faded and the dust cleared. One truth became undeniable. This so-called toy was about to rewrite the rules of modern warfare. America, 1940. Europe is on fire. Blitzkrieg, a word the world had never heard before, now burned across headlines and hearts alike. German armor rolled over nations in weeks. The world watched as mechanized warfare rewrote the rules of battle across the Atlantic. The United States Army knew one thing with chilling clarity: it was not ready. Its cavalry still trained on horseback. Its trucks were slow, heavy, and unreliable. In the coming storm, America needed mobility, fast, light, and everywhere at once. So, in the summer of 1940, the U.S. War Department issued an extraordinary challenge to American industry: build us a light reconnaissance vehicle under Satacoma Tiger. Pounds, four-wheel drive, able to carry 3 men and a machine gun, and deliver the prototype in just 49 days. It was a demand that bordered on the impossible. But war doesn't wait for comfort. Only 3 companies dared to answer. The first was the American Bantam Car Company of Butler, Pennsylvania, a tiny firm on the brink of bankruptcy. Bantam's engineers, led by Karl Probst, worked night and day in a desperate gamble to stay alive. Legend says Probst drew the first blueprints on scrap paper in a Pittsburgh diner. Fueled by coffee and determination, Bantam delivered its prototype, the Bantam reconnaissance car, with only hours to spare before the deadline. A skeletal little machine, square and rough, but it ran. And when Army testers at Camp Holabird put it through its paces, it worked. Sound engine turning over, gears grinding through mud, soldiers cheering faintly. But the War Department was cautious. Bantam was too small to mass-produce vehicles for an army on the march. So the blueprints were quietly handed to 2 larger firms, Willys Overland and Ford Motor Company. Now began a race not between nations, but between inventors at Willys. Engineers, led by Delmar, Barney, Roos, tore apart the Bantam design and rebuilt it from the ground up. They gave it a heart, a powerful little 4-cylinder engine known as the Godevel. It roared with 60 horsepower, 20 more than Bantam's, and could run for days on end with barely a hiccup at Ford. Henry Ford's empire brought industrial precision to the table. Their version, called the GP, was sleek and efficient. Each company tried to shave off ounces, strengthen joints, and squeeze performance out of every nut and bolt. Visual, split-screen testing, Ford's GP splashing through a stream. Willys MB climbing a hill, Bantam bogged in mud. The trials were brutal. Vehicles broke, wheels cracked, engines overheated. But one stood out: the Willys MB with its Godevel engine. Rugged frame and reliability under punishment impressed the testers at Holabird beyond measure. It wasn't pretty, but it was indestructible. By late 1941, the Army had its answer. Willys' design would form the foundation of the Army's light utility vehicle. soon to be produced by both Willys and Ford for mass deployment, but it still lacked something. A name, no one's quite sure where it came from. Some say it was the slurred abbreviation of its official designation, GP, for general purpose. Others say it was lifted from Popeye's magical pet, Eugene the Jeep, a small creature capable of going anywhere. Whatever the origin, the name stuck. Soldiers began calling it the Jeep, and the nickname fit perfectly: short, unpretentious, and unbreakable. At Holabird, army drivers tried their best to destroy it. They drove it into rivers, up embankments, through barbed wire. They overloaded it with sandbags and ammunition, ran it non-stop until the tires shredded. The Jeep refused to die. The tester's final report read like a love letter to simplicity. The vehicle can go anywhere a man can walk, and even places he cannot. Visual: soldiers laughing as the Jeep emerges from a swamp caked in mud. Engines still running. It wasn't just a vehicle, it was a revelation. The Jeep could replace horses, scouts, even motorcycles. It could tow small artillery, carry officers, deliver messages under fire. For the first time in history, armies could move with true speed and flexibility over any terrain. The army had demanded a miracle, and American industry had delivered one. What began as a desperate experiment became a testament to American ingenuity. Jeep was not born from luxury or endless funding, but from necessity, from sleepless nights, empty coffee cups, and a nation's faith that creativity could outpace catastrophe. It was proof that simplicity, when wielded with purpose, could outfight complexity soon. These prototypes would leave the test tracks behind and sail toward a world at war to deserts. Jungles and battlefields were the only test that mattered. Was survival fade to black? The sound of an engine revs, distant, determined. North Africa, November 1942, Operation Torch, the first great American invasion of the Second World War, a test not only of men and leadership, but of machines. Amidst the rumble of tanks and the clatter of another sound rises, higher pitched, lighter, almost defiant, the whine of the Jeep. Small convoys of Willys MBs surge off the landing craft, water lapping over their wheels. Some stall, others roar to life and claw their way up the beach, their drivers ducking under tracer fire. They look absurd beside the towering Shermans and lumbering trucks, like children in a battlefield of giants. But soon, these children begin leading the way. Cut, Jeeps speeding across dunes, windshields down, dust plumes trailing behind them. They scout for ambushes, mark minefields, and ferry officers inland through chaos and confusion. The Jeep, the so-called toy, has met Warhead Dash on Dot in North Africa. Every machine is tested to destruction. The heat melts rubber, seizes engines, and bleaches men's skin to parchment. German armor rules the open plains. Rommel's Afrika Korps, masters of maneuver and deception. But against such seasoned veterans, America's new army needs a weapon that can match their speed. The Jeep becomes that weapon. It darts across the desert like a lizard, slipping between dunes and wadis where heavier vehicles bog down. Its small frame allows it to climb slopes, weave through rocks, and vanish behind RIDGELINES. While tanks crawl, the Jeep races. While supply trucks break axles, the Jeep bouncing and bucking but never stopping. Sound, the steady drone of an engine through sandstorms, mixed with shouted orders in static-filled radios. Soon, commanders notice. General Patton himself takes one as his personal runabout, nicknaming it his command car. Eisenhower rides in another, standing upright in the passenger seat as convoys roar past. The Jeep becomes the war's quiet equalizer, giving generals the mobility once reserved for cavalry. They do everything. Tow guns, haul shells, evacuate the wounded. One moment they're scouts, the next, ambulances. Mechanics strip the windshield, mount a machine gun, and turn them into impromptu fighting vehicles in the searing heat of Tunisia. Entire reconnaissance units begin replacing their motorcycles with jeeps. They call them peeps or buckets. Soldiers start to trust them more than the very ground they drive on at Kasserine Pass. The first great clash between American and German armor. It's not tanks that carry the wounded back to safety, it's jeeps. Bouncing through artillery fire, tires shredded, radiators leaking. But engines still screaming. Even the enemy begins to take notice. German intelligence reports describe the Jeep as a light, all-terrain vehicle used in every conceivable role. It's small enough to hide in shell holes, light enough to lift from a ditch, and fast enough to outrun half-tracks. It gives the Americans and the British, who soon adopt it, an uncanny fluidity of movement. Rommel's officers, so proud of their mechanized doctrine, now face an opponent that can outmaneuver them on their own ground. Captured jeeps are repainted with black crosses and pressed into German service. Wehrmacht reports praise them as exceedingly practical and indispensable for reconnaissance. The mockery is gone, the laughter replaced by envy. By 1943, the deserts had forged the Jeep's reputation in fire and sand. But its true test still lay ahead. The fighting moves north to Sicily, to Italy, and with it, the Jeep, in the mountains near Salerno. It climbs slopes that defy logic. Soldiers lash ropes to the front bumper, guiding it over crumbling paths while engines snarl in protest, in muddy Italian valleys, where tanks sink and trucks spin helplessly. The Jeep soldiers on axle-deep engine choking, driver soaked in rain and mud. Sound, grinding gears, rain hammering metal, shouted commands in the dark. The vehicle's lightness, once seen as weakness, becomes its greatest weapon. It can cross bridges too fragile for armor, and ford rivers with little more than a tarpauli. By the time American troops reach Naples, the Jeep isn't just transport, it's lifeblood. Commanders issue standing orders. Keep the Jeeps running, no matter what it takes. For many soldiers, the Jeep became more than a machine. It was a companion, a silent partner that shared their danger and carried them home. One GI wrote in his diary near Monte Cassino, "If the Jeep can't get through, nothing can." They rode through blizzards, through shellfire, through every madness the war could conjure, trusting in that stubborn little engine and its 4 narrow tires. When they reached their destination alive, they'd pat the hood as if thanking an old friend in a war defined by machines of destruction, by Tigers and Shermans, bombers and battleships. The Jeep represented something different, not power, but persistence, not terror, but trust. It didn't win battles by brute strength, but by always being there, rain, dust, or fire, from North Africa to Italy. It became the heartbeat of Allied mobility, the quiet pulse that kept armies alive and moving. But as the war shifted to Europe's frozen forests, the Jeep's mission would change again. It would evolve from a weapon of movement to a lifeline of survival, Engine fades into silence. Snowfall continues. Cut to black, Europe, winter. 1944. The Ardennes, a quiet forest, turned into a frozen battlefield. The Allies call it the Bulge. The Germans call it Wacht am Rhein. The watch on the Rhine. Temperatures fall to 20 below zero. Snow blinds drivers. Engine seize in the cold. But still, the war moves, and leading that movement, once again, is the Jeep. As German armor punches through the American lines, chaos follows. Roads vanish beneath ice. Bridges collapse. Columns scatter in the darkness of that December. Supply lines, the arteries of war, begin to freeze, and then, like veins through the body, the Jeeps thread through. They carry ammunition and bandages, bread and blood plasma, gasoline and hope. Their headlights are blacked out, small slits of light under taped lenses. Their drivers wear scarves over their mouths, goggles iced with frost. Some have no doors, no roof, no heat, only faith in the little machine beneath them. Cut, a convoy of jeeps snaking along a forest track, engines whining against the snow. Each vehicle becomes a messenger, a pulse of life between cut-off units. When radio lines fail and telephones go dead, it's the Jeep that carries word through the blizzard. Orders, coordinates, pleas for help. They called them angels on wheels. Medics strap the wounded to hoods, tie stretchers across bumpers, and drive through snowfields under artillery fire. No armor, no protection, just courage and a machine that refuses to quit. One American medic remembered, the Jeep was our ambulance, our stretcher, our coffin if it came to that. We drove through hell with that little engine singing. In Bastogne, surrounded and starving, the 101st Airborne holds out. Their salvation doesn't come from tanks or trucks. It comes from Jeeps, through the forests. They bring food, ammo, even Christmas mail. Bouncing over frozen ruts at midnight, headlights dimmed, breath turning to ice. Ask any veteran of the Bulge about the Jeep, and their voices soften. An American sergeant recalls, if the Jeep couldn't get through, nothing could. A British driver adds, it wasn't just transport, it was home. You slept in it, fixed it, cursed it, and prayed it would start again. For many, the Jeep wasn't a vehicle anymore, it was a companion. Men gave them names, Lil Joe, Mud Skipper, Faith. They painted pin-ups on the sides, carved initials into the dash, and shared their rations with them as if they could taste. When a Jeep died, soldiers mourned it like they would a comrade. The Jeep's strength lay, not in armor or size, but in simplicity. When the cold froze carburetors and the snow clogged fuel lines, men tore them open with numb fingers. One wrench, one spanner, that's all it took to bring them back to life. No special parts, no factory tools, just grit and knowledge passed from one soldier to the next. It was a design born from necessity, perfected by experience. And in the winter of 1944, that simplicity kept armies alive, sound. The stutter of an engine coughing back to life, followed by cheers, even when buried under snow. They could be dug out and running again in minutes. When heavier vehicles sank or broke, the Jeeps kept rolling, bridging the gaps left by the machines of war. By now, even the enemy saw them differently. Captured diaries from Wehrmacht. Soldiers speak of the small American car that always runs. One German officer wrote in disbelief, our engines freeze, their cars go on. for men who once laughed at its size and shape. The Jeep had become a symbol of something unnerving, a reflection of Allied endurance. They understood now, this wasn't a toy. It was a philosophy on wheels, agile, adaptable, and unstoppable in the heart of the Ardennes at Bastogne. That philosophy reached its peak, trapped and surrounded. The 101st Airborne depended on a thread of jeeps sneaking through SHELLFIRE. They carried medics, maps, ammunition, and hope, until, finally, the siege broke and Patton's tanks reached the town. Among the first vehicles rolling through the lines were jeeps, their bodies scarred, fenders bent, engines still idling as if nothing had happened. When asked later how they survived, one soldier simply shrugged. The Jeep didn't give up. So neither did we. When historians speak of the Battle of the Bulge, they tell of tanks, strategy, and sacrifice, but beneath it all ran a quieter story, one of endurance in steel and spirit. The Jeep had carried more than men and supplies. It had carried belief that no matter how cold, how hopeless, how lost the road became, something could always keep moving forward. It was, quite literally, the lifeline of the front. But the Jeep's story didn't end when the guns fell silent, because when the soldiers came home, they brought it with them. Its legend would be sealed, not just by war, but by what it meant to the world after it. Engine hum fades out, fade to black. Europe burns, but liberation dawns. June 1944, Normandy, the guns still thunder at the beaches. But inland, among the hedgerows and wreckage, something small and improbable leads the way. A Jeep, mud-caked, dented, its flag snapping in the breeze, rolls into a village square. From behind cellar doors and ruined barns, people emerge. Cautiously at first, then running. Children swarm around it, laughing, climbing onto the hood. Old men remove their hats. Women weep openly. For them, this is not just another military machine. It is the face of freedom, a symbol of life returning after years of darkness. All across liberated Europe, it is the same scene when the Allied columns roll in. Tanks and half-tracks follow the main roads, but it is the Jeeps that reach the people first. They slip through alleyways, across bridges, into narrow squares where armor cannot go. Everywhere they go, the people cheer. Flags appear from windows. Flowers rain down onto the soldiers' helmets. Children ride on the fenders, laughing. A French farmer offers wine to a Jeep crew, their uniforms stained with oil and dust. And for the first time in years, the sound of that small four-cylinder engine, the Godevel, becomes the music of liberation. War had its giants, the tanks, the bombers, the artillery that shook countenance, but victory also needed something human, something that could reach the soul as well as the front line. The Jeep became that bridge. It carried chaplains to the wounded, journalists to the truth, doctors to the dying. It brought generals to the front, and letters from home to the trenches. While tanks crushed, Jeeps connected. They were small enough to reach the people, and simple enough to remind them that freedom could still fit in the hands of ordinary men to the enemy. The Jeep became a symbol of something deeper than military might. Captured German officers described it in their reports. The Americans possess a light vehicle that appears indestructible. It crosses terrain no machine of ours can manage. Another wrote, "They are everywhere, too fast to hit, too cheap to stop." What had begun as laughter in the Deserts of Tunisia now turned into awe and envy. The Wehrmacht had relied on precision, complex machines of limited number. The Americans relied on simplicity, millions of small, functional miracles. The Jeep embodied the industrial soul of democracy, adaptable, practical, and unbreakable. It was not just a vehicle, it was an idea. By 1945, as the Allies pushed into Germany, the Jeep was everywhere, leading convoys, ferrying prisoners, scouting bridges, clearing mines. It became the first Allied machine that many German civilians saw, rolling past their broken homes. A strange sight, this small, open car with no armor, its driver grinning beneath a helmet dusted with snow, and yet, for those who watched, it carried an unspoken message that the age of terror was ending, and something new was beginning. Pause, the faint sound of a Jeep idling. Over a ruined church, bell ringing in the distance. The Jeep had survived Africa's heat, Italy's mud, and the Ardennes cold, and now it rolled through the ruins of the Third Reich, the same as ever, humble, steady, unstoppable, half a world away. Another war still raged. The Jeep crossed oceans, its same steel bones reborn in khaki paint, landing on coral beaches beside Marines, on Guadalcanal, Saipan, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa. They were there, hauling ammunition, ferrying officers, dragging wounded men from the jungle. They carried generals like Vinegar, Joe Stilwell, and Douglas MacArthur. They rode in first during invasions, and often last out when the work was done. Even in the Pacific's unforgiving heat, they endured. Mechanics wrapped palm leaves around radiators, replaced spark plugs with pocket knives, and still the engine turned. Wherever American boots went, the Jeep followed. When the guns finally fell silent, the Jeep stayed behind, but not as a weapon. Now it became a builder. In France, they cleared debris and carried refugees. In Holland, they ploughed fields where oxen had died. In Italy, they pulled carts of bricks for rebuilding towns. Even in Asia, Jeeps delivered rice, mail, and medicine to starving villagers. From Normandy to Okinawa, from the Ardennes to Manila, they were still there. The same vehicles that once charged through enemy fire now carried food, priests, and doctors. Freedom, it seemed, had kept its wheels. When American troops returned home, they brought more than medals and memories. They brought the image of the Jeep, a simple, rugged thing that had carried them through the darkest days of their lives. It had no armor, no glory, no glamour, but it had heart, and that heart became a symbol of what the new world could be. Practical, determined, free, as factories retooled for peace. Willys began producing civilian versions, the CJ2A, the civilian Jeep, the same design that had liberated Europe, now plowed fields in Kansas and carried mail through the Rockies. The line between soldier and citizen blurred, and the little machine became part of both worlds. In the great sweep of history, wars are remembered for their weapons, but sometimes victory rides on something smaller, something that carries not destruction, but endurance, courage, and hope. From the deserts of Africa to the snows of Belgium, from the ruins of Berlin to the beaches of Okinawa, when freedom had wheels. They looked like this. The sound of an engine fades into silence. The war had ended, but the Jeep had only just begun its journey. Its next chapter would not be written in gunfire, but in peace, across farms, cities, and nations rebuilt from the ashes. The war was over, but the men who came home carried something with them, not just memories, not just scars, but the sound of a small machine that had never let them down. For many American veterans, the Jeep had been more than transport. It had been a companion, a lifeline through chaos, mud, and snow. Now, they found themselves back home on farms, in towns, on quiet back roads, and something was missing. They missed the Jeep at the Willys Overland plant. Executives understood this longing. During the war, they had built hundreds of thousands of Jeeps for the army. Now, they would build one for everyone else. In 1945, the first civilian model rolled off the line, the Willys CJ-A, the civilian Jeep. It looked almost identical to its battlefield ancestor. Same squat stance, same 7-slot grille, but this one war color, pasture green, harvest tan. Its new mission, peace across rural America. The Jeep found a new purpose. Farmers discovered it could do almost anything. Pull a harrow, power a sawmill, pump water, or haul timber, for veterans who had driven them across Europe. It was a reunion, only now the mud was from fields, not foxholes. A Willys advertisement promised, "The sun never sets on the new Jeep, the world's most useful vehicle." It wasn't marketing exaggeration, where tractors bogged down. The Jeep's four-wheel drive conquered rough terrain. Its simple design meant any farmhand with a wrench could keep it running. The same traits that had won the war, reliability, simplicity, endurance, were now building fences, digging wells, and opening the frontier. Soon, the Jeep escaped the fields and ventured farther into forests, deserts, and mountains. Explorers drove them where no car had gone before. Firefighters used them to reach remote blazes. Park rangers patrolled vast wilderness with nothing but a rifle, a radio, and their Jeep. It became a partner in exploration, a symbol of American renewal after years of war. The same vehicle that had once carried soldiers through the ruins of Europe now carried families to lakes and hills. Freedom of a different kind. Sound, the quiet hum of tires on gravel, a child's laughter from the back seat. Freedom had changed its shape, but its engine still sounded the same. But America was not alone in rediscovering the Jeep. Across the world, in the shattered aftermath of war, thousands of surplus Jeeps rolled off ships into ports from Marseille to Manila. They became the workhorses of reconstruction, clearing rubble in France, rebuilding bridges in Holland, towing supplies across the ruins of Germany. In British colonies, Jeeps served in jungles and deserts. In Africa, they carried doctors to remote villages. Even in former Axis nations, they became indispensable. In Italy, mechanics rebuilt captured Jeeps into taxis. In Japan, farmers used them to transport rice and tools through flooded paddies. The toy that Germany once mocked was now rebuilding the world it had helped to free. By the late 1940s, the Jeep had become more than a vehicle. It was a statement of humility over grandeur, of function over form. It represented a new kind of power, the power of utility. While other nations built monuments to victory, America built machines that worked practical tools for ordinary people. The Jeep was democracy on wheels, easy to repair, impossible to intimidate, and useful to anyone with the will to drive. It blurred the lines between military and civilian, Between survival and prosperity, every turn of its wheels told the same story. That simplicity, when perfected, could outlast complexity in less than a decade. The Jeep had traveled from the deserts of Tunisia to the farms of Ohio, from battlefront to back road. It had carried generals and gravediggers, soldiers and school teachers, farmers and firemen. It had proven that greatness doesn't always roar with might. Sometimes it hums softly with purpose. From every hill it climbed, every road it built, every life it carried, it whispered the same lesson, that true strength lies not in complexity, but in endurance, in humility, in simplicity itself. But as the dust settled and the years rolled on, the Jeep's story became more than engineering. It became a mirror, reflecting what humanity learned from its most devastating war. We return to where it all began. This road once echoed with gunfire, tank treads, and the laughter of men who thought they had seen everything war could offer. They had not seen this. The Germans had laughed. When they first saw it, that squat little contraption, with its flat fenders and boxy grin, it looked like a toy. It sounded like one too. But arrogance has a short memory. By war's end, that same toy had rolled through North Africa, Europe and the Pacific, a machine so unassuming, so ordinary that it outlasted empires. The Germans had measured strength in armor, in steel, in fear. But the Americans, and the Allies who drove beside them, built strength from something else. From simplicity, from ingenuity, from trust. The Jeep didn't win battles by intimidation. It won them by showing up every time, everywhere, no matter the odds. It carried generals and privates, stretchers and ammunition, letters from home and men who would never return there, and in doing so, it became more than a vehicle. It became a companion, veteran, one archive. She never failed me, veteran two. Archive, the Jeep saved my life. Veteran three, archive. If the Jeep couldn't get through, nothing could. It is rare, in war, for men to speak fondly of a machine. But they did, because this one had earned it. It was not designed for glory. Only for work, not for spectacle, only for survival. And that, perhaps, is why it endured in memory and in metal today, more than 80 years later. Many still run, some on farms, some in museums, others still kicking up dust on back roads, each one a living artifact of a simple idea that brilliance is not the enemy of simplicity, and that the humblest designs often outlive the grandest. Ambitions that the Jeep was not built to be beautiful, it was built to be useful, and in that purpose, it found immortality. The Jeep wasn't just a machine. It was a philosophy, proof that greatness can be forged in necessity, that true innovation begins not with power, but with humility. It carried soldiers across continents, helped rebuild nations, and reminded a world broken by arrogance that endurance, not dominance, is the measure of strength. In every dented fender, every mud-splattered tire, lies a quiet truth that sometimes the smallest machines carry the heaviest burdens of freedom. And though the war has long since ended, its echo remains in the sound of an engine turning over, in the dust of an open road, in the memory of a humble hero that outran arrogance itself.